lớp lớn chẳng hay
Um, Good evening, everyone. Hello. Hello. Please, can I be heard? Okay. So I believe we can start. So I would share my screen and let me see. Um, so please, can everyone see my screen? Please, can everyone see my screen, please? Hello. Please, can someone confirm if you can see my screen?
I can see your screen, sir.
Okay. Thank you. So tonight we'll be looking at, I believe we'll be doing both economics and UGBS 104. So I would be running through very, very fast so that we can make time for the next course. So we'll be looking at Introduction to Economics 2. That is the first presentation, and we'll be looking to answer a couple of questions under this. And let's try and make the session as interactive as it can be, because there are some questions in there that I believe that we can discuss. Okay, so let us go straight to the point. So the learning outcomes of this particular session is that by the end of this session, we are looking to define macroeconomics, and then also differentiate between microeconomics and macroeconomics. And then also we are looking to explain the main goals of macroeconomic policies. Okay. So let's look at microeconomics. And last semester we did Econ 101. That was based on microeconomics. So when you're looking about at microeconomics, or when you're talking about microeconomics, what we are basically looking at is the study of the behavior of individuals, that is small, isolated, and disaggregated units. Okay, so microeconomics basically focuses, okay, or the main focus of microeconomics is when it comes to individual economic units, okay. And when we're talking about individual economic units, we are talking about things like firms, consumers, and then industries. So these are the three basic focus of microeconomics. So there are firms, consumers, and industries. So we look at things like how supply and demand, pricing policies, and consumer behavior, and how this affects individuals, firms, and then industry. So basically, that becomes a prime focus of microeconomics. It deals with the smaller unit of an economy. Okay, so that is that. So when we are talking about a firm, what we are talking about is a single unit of production. Whereas an industry is a group of firms that produces identical or closely related goods. So what we are saying here is that, okay, let's use an example that let's say you go to Tema industrial area, okay, or you go to any industrial area, and then you meet a cluster of companies that is situated at that place. So when you get there, you would find several companies, okay, or several firms producing there. Each company is a single unit of production, okay? So one company or an individual company becomes a firm, which is a single unit of production. But when we take a group of firms that are identical, okay, in their production process, or they produce closely related goods, and that is a key here. If you have firms clustered at a place or on one spot, and they are producing different goods, we cannot call them um, an industry, because they do not meet the basic criteria that qualifies a group of firms to be called an industry. And that criteria is that they have to produce identical. So when we're talking about identical, we are talking about similar goods, okay, or closely related goods. So that is a firm and an industry, and it will be important to note the difference between these two, because this a likely examinable question that could be asked in the examination. It could be asked to differentiate between a firm and an industry, though it is somewhat unlikely, but yeah. So if you're asked to differentiate between a firm and an industry, the main difference is that a firm is a single unit of production, whereas an industry is a group of firms that produces identical or closely related goods. So the term microeconomics and macroeconomics were first given by Ragnar Frisch in 1933. Prof. J.M. Keynes is known as the father of please, I'm coming. Okay, sorry. So you are saying that Prof. J.M. Keynes is known as the father of modern macroeconomics. So now we've talked about microeconomics, and we are saying that oh, I'm coming, sorry. Okay, sorry. We can continue. So we've spoken about microeconomics, and we are saying we said that when it comes to microeconomics, we are looking at the smaller unit of an economy, okay, where we are focusing mainly on individuals, firms, and industries, and everything that relates to them. But then when it comes to macroeconomics, we are not looking at just the smaller unit of economy, but then but then we are looking at the larger units of an economy. So we are looking at the entire economy as a whole, okay? And under that, we are looking at things like gross domestic product. We are looking at things like unemployment. We are looking at things like inflation. We are looking at things like fiscal and monetary policies. So these are things that affects the nation as a whole, or that affects nations, that affects societies. Okay, this affects the broader economy. So when it comes to macroeconomics, we are looking at the larger economy as a whole. So it examines the behavior of economic aggregates, such as aggregate income, consumption, investment, and the overall level of prices. So we are not looking at measuring just the price of one commodity, but we are looking at measuring the general pricing of commodities in general. Okay. So instead of we just talking about the price of one commodity going higher, we talk about inflation as a whole. That is generally how the economy is performing. Okay, that is what we refer to as macroeconomics. So it deals with aggregate behavior, which is described as the behavior of households and firms together. So we are seeking to combine the individual forces in an economy and looking at how they perform, okay, in terms of a larger extent. Okay, so the main difference between microeconomics and macroeconomics is that microeconomics focuses on basic units of an economy, which is the individuals, the firms, and the industries, whilst macroeconomics looks at the economy as a whole and its aggregate outcomes. Okay, so let's move on. So what determines important issues in macroeconomics? So these are some basic things that we always need to have answers to when it comes to macroeconomics. And for me, this are like some of the most important stuff that could be asked, okay, in our examination, because now we are preparing for examination and we should look to answer some of these questions or have answers to some of these questions, because these are very, very important and topical issues in macroeconomics. So I would want us to take this one by one, even before we look at anything else. I wouldn't just, although subsequent sections do provide clues to unveiling the answers to these questions, but I would want us to pinpoint the answers to these questions before we even continue. Okay, so we start from what determines economic fluctuations. So what determines economic fluctuations? And that is the business cycle. So please, I would want to open, let's have an open discussion since these are questions. So please, what determines economic fluctuations. Please, would anyone want to contribute to this question? Please, anybody wants to contribute to the question, what contributes to economic fluctuations, or the contributing factors to economic calculation? And to understand the contributing factors to economic fluctuations, we would really have to understand the business cycle, what it is, and how it operates. So let us look at the what the business cycle actually means. Okay, so when you're talking about a business cycle, to understand this in the simplest form, let us just look at our personal lives. Okay, as a person, please. I'm just using this as an example to explain it. I'm not trying to say that it has anything to do with once as an individual unit of an economy, like a person, because we are dealing with macroeconomics, and macroeconomics has no direct relation, though it has indirect relation, or we contribute indirectly towards macroeconomics. It has no direct relations with individuals, or we are not looking at individuals, but we are looking to aggregate all forces in an economy, that is both individuals, firms, industries. You don't just look at them individually, but we bring, or we create an aggregate of all those things, and we look at the general sentiment instead. So let us look at what the business cycle is. So I was saying that even in our personal lives, you can realize that things are not always flat at every point in time. Okay, so there are times that you do experience up times and down times. Okay, there are sometimes you do experience growth. Okay, financially and in other spheres of life, and then this growth continues to a point, and you realize that it starts to flatten. Okay, and then gradually it starts to decline. If you recall the law of diminishing returns, you would get to understand this better, that it does apply to all phases of life, even in consumption. So under utility theory, we stated that when a person continues to consume a commodity over and over again, gradually their satisfaction gain hits the maximum and it begins to decline. Okay, and that is the same thing that happens in an economy. That is in macroeconomics. Macroeconomics basically has 4 cycles. Okay, that businesses goes through. Okay, and that economics goes through, and we call this the business cycle. And to measure these fluctuations or this cycle, we use something we call GDP, which is a gross domestic product of a country. What GDP is that GDP is a unit that measures the total value of all goods and services in a country. Okay, so if we take Ghana and then we combine or add the entirety, okay, of all goods and services that flows throughout a country, okay, and even outside, within a country to out, and even to outside of a country within a particular year, we call that measure the GDP. And GDP measures the size of an economy. It creates a general sentiment as to whether there is economic growth or there is economic decline. Okay, so if we want to measure GDP, we look at certain stuffs. Okay, we look at consumption. Okay, that is basic consumer behavior. We are talking about buying goods buying services, okay? So that means that if you even buy one pure water, it contributes to the GDP of a country. Because if, I think Ghana's GDP is currently around $82 billion, okay? And then everything that goes on in a country contributes to the GDP of the country. So for instance, what you buy, okay, or your expenditure, what you spend on as an individual, at the end of the day, contributes to the GDP of a country. We are talking about investments, okay, lands, properties, machineries. Investments in all these things are also counted when calculating the GDP of a nation. And we also look at the government's expenditure. So what government is spending on roads, schools, infrastructure, all those things, defense budgets, okay, all those things are also included in the calculation of GDP. And then we also look at the net exports. So we take a country's exports and we subtract its import from it. And then we also add that value. So in calculating GDP, we use a formula, okay? The formula for calculating GDP is consumption plus investment plus government expenditure plus net exports. And when we add all these units together, we're able to determine the GDP of a country. We have types of GDP. I think in the subsequent sections we'll discuss that into depth. We have types of GDP. We have real GDP and we have nominal GDP. Okay, so we are basically saying that, look, if you calculate the GDP of a country, if you add the sum total of individual consumptions, okay, to investments, to government expenditure, okay, to the net export, basically, though we get the GDP of a country, we also have to subtract inflation or deflation within that period of time. And when we subtract inflation or deflation from the our GDP, which is our real GDP, we get a nominal. Which from the nominal GDP, I mean, we get a real GDP. So please, we would go in depth into that in the subsequent sections. So what we are saying here is that if we know the GDP of a country and we analyze them over a period of time, we can be able to tell, okay, whether the country is going through economic fluctuations or not. Okay, so the four phases of a business cycle, we are talking about expansion, okay, being the first being the first, and then after that, we are talking about the peak. Okay, so we are saying that economies do expand, or the first phase is expanding, and economies during expansion they would hit their peak, or they can reach peak level, and then they begin to contract or contraction, which is a recession. Okay, and then after that, we have something we call trough. Okay, which is spelled TROUGH. So let us talk about them one after the other. Okay, so expansion. So expansion is basically characterized, or when you're talking about expansion, you're basically looking at a point in time when there is a rise in economic activities. Okay, so GDP increases, unemployment declines, and consumer confidence rises, okay, in the economy. So we are saying that basically around that point in time, the country experiences growth in terms of their overall GDP. There's some total of as in all expenditure, investments, export, net, everything becomes positive. Okay, the GDP rises, and then around that point in time, we should see unemployment decreasing, because look, when the GDP of a country is rising, or when the economy is booming, or the economy is doing well, the nation attracts investments. We have people coming in to invest in the economy. Okay, as in both foreign investment and local investment. People have confidence in that economy, and they wouldn't cease to pump whatever they have into their economy. We have jobs coming up and all those stuffs. Okay, businesses expand and they tend to employ when new companies are created, they employ more people. When businesses expand, they employ more people. So automatically, an expansion will lead to a drop or a decline in unemployment. And then consumer confidence will also rise. People would be confident in the economy, as in there is a positive sentiment or overall sentiment in the economy. And I think we did experience a similar situation lately. So we had a scenario where the exchange rate dropped. Okay, that is the CD kind of appreciated against other currencies. We had things like fuel prices and other things dropping, and then the lorry fares were increased at some places and all those stuff. And generally, you could see that people were happy. Okay, the consumer confidence began to rise. People started becoming confident in the economy, or they believe that the economy is heading towards a good path. Okay, but contrary to that, if it was to be the opposite, okay, and let's say the currency is deflating, we have everything going bad. Okay, everything going bad in the sense of we have inflation on the rise, prices of goods are rising, if everything is rising, you realize that there is a negative sentiment in the economy. People do not have confidence in that economy. Businesses wouldn't want to really involve themselves in that economy. They don't really want to invest. People stop investing in that economy. Okay, and that is the scenario where we call it trough. That is the opposite of expansion. So that is the opposite scenario to an expansion. In expansion, we basically see a business expand. Okay, things are an economy expand. I mean, things are going well. The GDP is rising. You have unemployment declining and the consumer confidence rising. Okay, but when it comes to a trough, which is the opposite of expansion, you have the GDP dropping, you have unemployment rising, and consumer confidence will drop. So you can be asked a question like differentiate, or what is the difference between expansion, okay, and a trough? And the basic difference between the two is that expansion is the phase where we experience an overall increase in a GDP, or an overall growth in the GDP of a country, and then coupled with a drop in unemployment rates, and then an increase in consumer confidence. Whereas for a trough, we witness a fall in a country's GDP, unemployment begins to rise, and then overall confidence or consumer confidence drops. Okay, so that is the difference between the two. So let us look at some characteristics of expansion when it comes to the business cycle. So when it comes to the business cycle, we are saying that economies expand, okay? And when they are expanding, we see some stuffs that indicates that, look, this economy is expanding. And what are the things that indicates that an economy is expanding? So one, we experience an increase in consumer spending. People begin to spend more because look, when an economy is expanding, we have jobs being created. And look, when more jobs are being created, people are now getting good jobs to do. People are receiving good salaries. And when people are getting jobs to do and they are receiving good salaries, they have money. Their purchasing power increases. They can purchase more goods. So they tend to spend more. So we are saying that there is an increase in consumer spending. People have more money in their pockets, or there is more money flowing in the economy. People are buying more in general, okay? And two, there is an increase in business investment. So overall, we are saying that there is an increase in consumer confidence. Confidence begins to rise in the economy. And when there is a rise in overall confidence in the nation's economy, it attracts investments, okay? Both local and foreign investment. People are very confident of the direction, of the general direction of the economy, and they will not hesitate to pump their money into the system. And we saw this similar thing happen in China, okay? Right now, China is the business center or the business hub of the whole world. Look, most of the things that you use are from China, if you like it or not, right? So there is something in your house currently that was made in China, okay? And It's did not really just happen in a day. Okay, it was a process that took place. And how did this happen? Basically, they created the atmosphere or they created the environment. I don't know. I was listening to one news once, I think from First Post or something, and they were making an analysis, okay, between previously, as in countries which did more business with the international community, as in who had higher export rates, okay, and previously the United States were leading because they used to deal with more countries in terms of exporting goods. But now it is no more. China is the one who is leading. And how did they do that? They created that environment for businesses to thrive. And look, when an economy is booming, people want to come in, people want to invest, people want to create businesses, people want to create industries. And so when there is expansion, basically we are saying that there is an increase in business investment, okay? And this business investment that comes increase employment. So there is also an increase in employment when there is expansion. So there is generally an increase in the employment rate, which automatically causes a reduction in unemployment rates. And then due to businesses coming in and the increase in investments, we're also saying that there is rising production. Okay, so factories and services increase output to meet growing demand. Look, money is in the system, money is flowing. People have the ability to purchase goods, they can buy things. Okay, so because of that, automatically firms will be forced to also increase their production. I was okay. I think I wouldn't talk about this. I wouldn't talk about this. Okay, so and there is also an inflationary pressure. Okay, when a country is experiencing expansion, okay, in a business cycle, or is at the expansion phase of a business cycle, there is also inflation. And what do we mean? We are saying that look, there is more money in the system. People are buying. Okay, people are ready to buy goods. They have the money to buy goods. What will happen? What will basically happen is that the companies that are producing the goods will also increase the prices of their goods. It's demand and supply. Okay, so automatically, when demand is when there is an increase in demand, okay, with supply remaining constant, the prices of the commodities will increase. Okay, because there would be scarcity, prices would be would increase. So there would be an inflationary pressure. Prices of commodities will start increasing because look, people have the money to buy. No matter how you price the commodity, people will buy. Okay, so we are saying that when a country is experiencing or is at the expansion phase of the business cycle, they experience an increase in consumer spending. People spend more, investment increases, unemployment reduces, production increases, and then there is also an inflationary pressure, or inflation also increases. Okay, so let's look at the second phase of the business cycle. So we said the first phase is expansion. The second phase is the peak. So look, there is a theory that everything that rises at a point in time has to fall. Okay, so look, if the economy continues to grow and grow and grow, there's going to be a point in time where diminishing returns will set in. Okay, it will start to peak, or it will start to reach the highest form of its growth. So the peak, when an economy is at its peak in the business cycle, is at the point where economic activities reaches its maximum output. And usually that precedes a downfall, or that immediately that happens, then a decline will follow. Okay, everything starts to flatten. So realize that previously the GDP of the nation was growing at a rate of, let's say, this year was 3%, next year was the first year was 3%, the next year was 5%, the following year was 10%, and now you realize that everything was increasing at a very fast rate, but all of a sudden, now instead of it going from 10% to, let's say, 15%, now it goes from 10% to 12%, and the next year increases by just 11%. So realize that now the increase is now becoming kind of tighter as compared to the previous years. Okay, so instead of it increasing by, let's say, 10%, 15%, it's now increasing by just 5%, 7%, or 3%. So if you compare it to the previous increases, you realize that the GDP of the country is now, the GDP growth is now flattening. Okay, so when we go down, we are going to look at the GDP curves of some country, and we can easily look at that to identify where there is growth or expansion, where there is peak, where there is contraction, or where the economy is experiencing a trough. Okay, so that is that for the peak. Okay, and then if we want to know if an economy is at its peak in a business cycle, you realize that, look, employment reaches its maximum. Everybody has a job doing. Okay, now basically, like, there are so many job openings, there are jobs everywhere. People have to now select, like how it is in the United States currently. You have people who are leaving Ghana to go and work abroad in some of these Western countries because there are a lot of jobs there. Okay, there are a lot of jobs there. Indeed, it probably indicates that an economy is reaching its peak. Okay, everything is booming. Jobs are there. People now have to select. People can even decide that, no, for me, I wouldn't do this. I'll choose this instead. They have the right to even select between jobs. That gives you a fair indication that that economy is in its peak. Okay. And then we're also saying that at that particular level, there is still high consumer confidence, okay, because things are still working. The economy is at its maximum point. There is a good general sentiment, okay. There is a general, the general sentiment in the economy is positive. The confidence is there. The people believe in the economy. They believe that the economy is doing well, okay. And then, as at that point in time, inflation also occurs, okay, just as that of expansion, because people have jobs, people are spending. And look, so far as people are spending, inflation will occur. Inflation occurs because of two basic reasons. We have demand pull inflation and we have cost pull inflation. Okay, so demand pull inflation is a kind of inflation that occurs as a result of an increase in the spending power of the people. Okay, so people have the ability to spend, they are demanding more, supply is constant. What will happen? There would be scarcity. The suppliers will be forced to increase their prices because they know that, look, the people have the money. If we increase the prices, they will still buy. I think there was a current debate with DSTV. Some people might be aware. If you follow stuff that happens on social media, Sam George, which I believe is a minister of, is it communications or so? I stand to be corrected. Was seeking to force a reduction in the prices, okay, of DSTV subscriptions. And look, it was a back and forth. DSTV also wrote a letter and they are saying that no, look, the reason why we cannot reduce our prices is because generally the costs of running a business in Ghana is relatively high. Okay, so they are saying that, look, they cannot reduce their prices. And some judge is also saying that, no, if you go to Nigeria, people are paying almost 50% lesser for the same subscription and for the same service. So why should you be charging someone in another country almost 50% lesser and be charging people in Ghana 50% more? And it's a fair argument, okay? Because basically, like, there has to be some form of balance, okay? But then look, technically, one of the reasons why DSTV is charging the amounts that they are charging here is because they know Ghanaians have the money to pay, or Ghanaians can pay. If they charge that money in Nigeria, they cannot pay, or people will not pay, or people would not access their subscriptions. Okay, so basically, the increase or the rise in the prices of DSTV consumption, DSTV subscriptions in Ghana is as a result of its demand. It's as a result of the spending power of the people here. People here have more money to spend. They can be able to afford those services with ease. So the prices are automatically higher. That is the forces of demand and supply. Okay, so another cause of inflation is the cost pull inflation. And that is when there is an increase in the prices of commodities as a result of the cost of production of the commodities. And that is the argument here. DSTV is saying that, look, our prices are higher here because the cost of rendering our services here is higher, which is costful inflation. But Sam George is also saying that, no, that's not the truth. That's not the truth. It's because you think Ghanaians can pay the money you are charging. That's why you keep charging it. So now reduce the amount. Okay. So that is the two types of inflation. So we are saying that when an economy is experiencing its peak, what basically happens is that inflation is also higher because the demand is small. People can buy more stuff. Hence, the inflation is relatively higher. Okay. And then it also experiences signs of slowing growth. And look, this is the most important when identifying that an economy is at the peak in the business cycle. There has to be a slow growth. Okay. Although the economy is growing, but the growth is slow. Okay. So let's say if it's a curve, you realize that the curve is now flattening. So the previous years it was 20%, it was 10%, it was 25%. It was higher, but now all of a sudden you're having things like 5%. It's growing, but the growth rate is now 5%, it's now 3%, it's now 2%, it's now 5%. You can tell that, look, although the economy is growing, but it is growing at a slower rate, or it is flattening in terms of growth. So you can say that as at that point in time, the economy is experiencing its peak. And the third phase in the business cycle is contraction. So the contraction phase is when the economy gradually starts to experience a decline. Okay, we start to see that, look, the GDP is falling, and now employment has started becoming some star. Okay, although there are the jobs are there, but now it's like there is parity. Okay, it's like there is a slight drop in terms of the employment rates. Okay, unemployment is starting to show itself in the system. Okay, so things are now beginning to show negative signs of growth. So it is coupled by a falling GDP growth. Okay, so the GDP growth starts to become negative. It is no more positive. Okay, it starts to become negative. We start to see that the GDP of the nation is becoming negative. Last year, the growth rate was 15% or 5% or 3%. But this year, the growth rate is what? Negative 1%, meaning instead of the GDP rising, the GDP is rather falling. So if you want to know whether an economy is experiencing contraction, we look at the following characteristics, or we look at these indicators. There has to be a decrease in consumer spending. So we are saying that, look, now things are not going as well as they were. Okay, now the jobs are now falling. Incomes have started falling. Purchasing power has started dropping. Consumer spending is now dropping. People are no more spending as they used to. So at first, let's say if every day you used to take 4 meals in a day, okay, in the morning you take your breakfast, maybe some oats. In the afternoon you eat rice. In the evening around 4, you take, let's say, banku, and then before you sleep you have some tea. Now you have to take 1 out of it. Instead of now taking tea around 7 p.m. or 8 p.m., you now push the evening banku to like 6 p.m. and then you sacrifice the tea in the evening. Okay, because now your purchasing power is dropping. Your ability to spend is now basically reducing, okay, or it is falling. So it signifies that our economy is experiencing contraction. Okay, and then there are business cutbacks. So companies will start reducing investments, and the reason why they are doing that is because of the basic sentiments, or the basic consumer confidence, or the basic confidence in the system. The confidence has to drop. Companies are not so sure whether their investments can survive the long term. The future is no more certain. Okay, so they have to take their money out. They feel that, look, the profit that I've made is enough. Let me now leave. Okay, they now feel like, look, let me start redrawing some of my services. Let me start reducing my investments in the system. So what happens is that the investments or the amount of investments that investors are really are willing to pump into the system starts to drop. So there is a drop in investments, and then there is an increase in unemployment. So unemployment starts to happen. Okay, we start seeing people getting unemployed or people looking for jobs, and then there is deflationary pressure. People start crying that look, goods and services are higher because now the money is not there. So prices of goods and services starts to drop. That is what we saw, right? One of the main concerns of the people with the 2024 elections was that prices of goods were higher and they wanted them to drop. Okay. And yeah, so that is what basically happens when a country is experiencing contraction. And that was what happened to Ghana in the previous years. The economy was experiencing a contraction. And people were crying that the prices of goods and services were higher, so they wanted them to be reduced. But as to whether they have been reduced enough or not, I think it is that for the people to tell. So now a troll. So a troll is the point where we can say that the economy is at its lowest form. It is at its lowest point in the business cycle. Okay, as at this point, everything is going very, very bad. Like as in the country is experiencing the highest phase of a recession. I think this kind of thing happened this country. I think this is Sri Lanka or something, and it was so worse to a point where people couldn't even get food to eat. You start seeing things like malnutrition. People do not have they don't even have the means to afford like basic survival. Like they don't have the means to survive. They cannot purchase food. People now start to eat once in a day. People start to eat twice in a day. Production is falling. Everything is in shambles. The economy is in a very, very terrible form. The government cannot spend. The nation is in debts. GDP is falling massively. Okay. As at that point in time, we say that, look, the country is experiencing a true. Okay. So I would want to correct myself. I said something and I would want to correct myself. I indicated that the opposite of an expansion is a contraction. But please, the opposite of an expansion is the true. But please, the opposite of an expansion is rather the it's not the opposite of an expansion is not the true, but rather contraction. And the opposite of the peak is the true. So the upper peak or the peak, the higher peak is the peak, and then the peak to the lower side is the true. Okay, so where the economy is at its highest form is the peak. When it's at its lowest form is the true. When it's growing, it's expansion. When it's falling, is contraction. Let's take note of this. Is that there is high unemployment. Okay, so relatively high unemployment. Although in contractions there is also employment, but although in contraction here there is there is unemployment, but with that of a true, the unemployment is relatively higher or is very, 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 very high. And then economic stabilization. So there is that case, okay, for economic stabilization. People start to cry. They want the economy to stabilize. Their confidence in the economy has tanked. Okay, as in now people start looking for opportunities to run away from their countries. Okay, they are just looking. They don't believe that there is a future for the nation anymore. They believe that look, the only thing that is left for them to do, or the best option for them, is to run away from the country. They have to look for alternative or better means of survival elsewhere apart from the country that they are in. Okay, and as at that point in time, it is necessary for governments to intervene. So there are government policies that seeks to stimulate the economy, okay, and economic growth. That is, the government tries to institute desperate policies aimed at stabilizing the economy or aimed at reducing inflation or reducing the persistent rise in goods. So you start seeing things like the government starts to put pressure on companies to try to reduce their prices, those things, you start to see that pressure. And if those things happen, it tells you that the country is experiencing a throw. That is the lowest form. And usually when the country experiences a throw, you start seeing an expansion following, or an economic growth would follow, because there's a saying that a person who is already on the ground cannot fall anymore. The economy is at its lowest level, so the only thing that can happen is an increase in economic growth. Okay, so generally we are saying that to note the business cycle, the basic indicator is the GDP of the country. Okay, so that is what we mean when we talk about the business cycle. So I would want to take questions at this point before we continue. Does anybody have any question on the business cycle or the 4 phases of the business cycle? Please, if you have any question, feel free to ask. Any question, please? All right, then if there is no question, I would presume that everyone understands, so we can proceed to continue. Okay, so this is what we refer to as the business cycle, okay? And within the business cycle, we talked about, oh, please, I'm coming. So this is basically the business cycle, okay? How the economy of nations do work, okay? So there is a question here that what determines economic fluctuations? That's the next thing we are going to discuss, okay? What determines economic fluctuations? What determines economic fluctuations? So please, will someone want to contribute to this? So based on what we've explained under the business cycle, what do we think causes economic fluctuations? We are saying that the economy can expand. It can experience its peak. It can contract, and it can be at its lowest point, which is a true. So we are saying that what are the factors that causes the business cycle, that causes an economy to expand, that causes the economy to experience a peak, that causes it to decline, that causes it to experience a true. So please, the floor is open. So if you have anything to say, yeah, what it is. What causes economic fluctuations? What causes economic fluctuations? All right, Mr. Richard. Please, your mic is enabled. Hello, Mr. Richard. Please, we are listening to you.
Hello, sir. Please, can you hear me?
Yes, please, we can hear you.
Okay. I'm saying my point to this is we can talk of the inflation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so Mr. Richard is saying that inflation is a factor that causes or is a causation factor to economic fluctuations. Okay, so Does anyone else have any contribution to also make? Okay. So let's move on. All right, so thank you, Mr. Richard, for your contribution. Okay, so the determinants or the factors that determines economic fluctuations. Okay, so we are talking about the causation factors instead. So when you're talking about things that or what determines economic fluctuations, we are basically talking about inflation, as Mr. Richards said. So the rate of inflation.
Hello, sir.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, please. Hands are up. Mr. Desmond.
Okay. So, Mr. Desmond, please, we are listening to you.
Okay, good evening.
Evening.
I think the CD appreciating and depreciating also determines the economic fluctuations, and also the import and export of a country within a given period of time determines the economic fluctuations too.
Okay. That's a very, very powerful contribution there. So imports and exports, inflation and deflation, and these are very, 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 very true. So we are saying that basically, if you want to know if an economy is doing well, we want to look at the net export. Okay, you want to see the country exporting more than what it imports. So if the country does export more or there is a rise in exports, it's a signal that there is an increase in domestic production. Okay, it tells you that the country is producing more. Okay, if the country is producing lesser than it consumes, automatically it will have to import rather. Okay, importation is just like bringing goods from outside the country into your country to meet domestic demands. People are demanding, but the country is not producing. The country will have to import. And even in Ghana, even tomatoes, we do import. I don't know if it is throughout the year, but at certain points in the year, we do import tomatoes from Burkina Faso and the rest. So this gives very, very legitimate questions as to is our economy really growing or not? Because if something as basic as tomatoes, we do import, it creates legitimate questions to be asked. So you want to see if a country is exporting more goods or not. Okay, you want to see if inflation is positive or if it is negative. Okay, so if inflation is positive, it tells you that the prices of goods and services are increasing. If it is negative, it tells you that the prices of goods and services are dropping. And if the prices of goods and services are increasing, what phase do we think the economy is currently experiencing in the business cycle? Or what business cycle do you think we are currently in? If inflation is constantly on the rise, the prices of goods are increasing. Should we take that as a question, or let's just move straight off? So if the prices of goods are generally increasing, it can be both a positive indicator and a negative indicator at the same time. It could mean people have more to spend, okay, or it could mean as in the expenditure the purchasing power of people is relatively high, which would signify an expansion or the peak, okay. Or it could also be negative. It could also be negative when inflation is coupled with lower incomes, it tells you that it is not expansion and it is not at the peak level, but then the economy is experiencing a contraction, or it is experiencing a trough. Please let us understand this very well. If prices of goods are going up, okay, and the prices of goods going up is caused as a result of increase in purchasing power or increase in spending power, or it is demand pull inflation. People have more money to spend, and as a result, the prices of goods and services are going higher. It tells you that the economy is expanding. Why? Because people are receiving better incomes, and they have more money to spend. Okay, and that is expansion or the peak level. But if prices of goods and services are higher, yet still income is dropping, it is a very, very negative indicator. Why? Because look, people cannot afford the goods. That's what was happening. Look, people could not afford goods and services, yet still the prices kept on increasing, and that was cost pull inflation. The cost of production kept on increasing, and if cost of production keeps on increasing, whilst income level are stagnant or keeps reducing, then automatically the country would experience or would be in the contraction phase or would be at the trough phase. Okay, so inflation also plays a key role here. Okay, and then consumer spending is also an indicator. The ability of people to spend automatically reflects their income levels. If people have the ability to spend more, it tells you that their income levels are higher, which means that, or which indicates that the economy is doing well, or the economy is at the expansion or the peak levels. And business investments, if you want to know which business, we also have to look at the business investments, the amount of investments that are coming in, or the sum total of investments, are they increasing or they are decreasing? If investments are increasing, it tells you that you're experiencing what? You're experiencing expansion or we are at the peak level. But if investments are reducing or are dropping, or investors are pulling out of the system, it tells you that we are at the contracting levels or the economy is experiencing a trough. And if our net export is negative, okay, that is we are importing more, okay, than we export, then it tells you that look, the economy is not also doing well either. That means domestic production is very low. We are not producing enough that can meet local consumption. That tells you that what the economy is experiencing either a contraction or the trough. And that is very, very obvious, because if business investments are more, production is booming, we know that is contraction and a peak. But if production is really dropping, automatically you have to import, and our net import will be negative, which is also a determinant. And then another determinant is which we could add. Should we add it or not? Let's not add it, please. Let's just take the one that you mentioned. Okay, I think this is not a key determinant, so let us leave that out. I wouldn't even add that at all. So these are some of the determinants of economics fluctuations. This determines which particular point of these business cycles that we find ourselves in. So we are talking about business investments. We are talking about consumer confidence. We are talking about net export. That is the export minus the import. We are talking about what inflation. Okay, these are some of the things that determines the overall cycle that a country finds itself in at any point in time. Okay, and please let me add this. I forgot to add, please, the GDP, which is the most important. Okay, the GDP of a country, because I said earlier that that is a main measure, or that is a main determinant of economic fluctuations. it is in fact the most important. If the GDP of a country is dropping, there are questions to be asked. Okay, we know it is in the contraction or the true, but if it's expanding, we can say the economy is experiencing an expansion or a peak. So we are done with just the first question. I'm taking my time to explain them thoroughly because I believe that these questions are fundamental to macroeconomics, and they might be some of the main questions to be asked in our examination. And I'm very sure of that. Like, no, I can't be 100% sure because I'm not setting a question, but I can be at least 70% sure that most of the questions might come from these things here, since they are topical to the entire macroeconomics or other sections, throws more light on these questions or does seek to answer this question. So let's all know how to answer this as a preparation for our examination. And then next question. Why some countries grow faster? Okay. So why some countries grow faster than the others? I'm coming. Someone said he's in the lobby. And, hello, Mr. Prince.
Yes,
Prince.
Mr. Isaac. Yeah, Mr. Isaac.
Yeah, yes, please. I think someone is in the lobby and was complaining on the platform to not be admitted.
Okay, I'll attend to him. So please don't worry, proceed. All right, thank you.
Oh, okay, please. All right, please. So the next question: why some countries grow faster than others? Okay, so the second question that we'll be looking at is why some countries grow faster than others. And look, this is a very, very important topic in macroeconomics because economic growth is different for countries. During COVID was a time where there was a global shock, okay, or most economies were declining, but yet there were others who were also doing well, okay. So why does this happen? Why do some economies grow faster than others? As at the same time, some might be complaining that look, there is war going on in other countries and it's affecting the economy, and at the same time, others will be experiencing economic growth. So what do you think are some of the factors that contributes to faster economic growth for some countries as compared to the others? Okay, so let me open, or let's give this as an open question so that people can contribute before we discuss this question as well. So please, today the main aim is to finish all those questions or completely answer all those questions. So please, I believe for the because of time, let us try and then be quick with that. Okay, Mr. Kayum, please, your mic is allowed.
Okay, I want to just contribute to the question that you just asked.
Okay.
I can say that the answer is import and export.
Okay.
Because in Ghana here, we do more import than export. So that is why sometimes in the COVID time, we experience that issue in Ghana because most of our goods are imports from other countries like fuel and things. So if that happens, it will affect us more.
Okay, okay. So that's very, 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 very true. Thank you, Kaim, for your contribution. Mr. Richard.
Okay, so another factor can be that investing more in people so that they will get skills and knowledge for the country, or for them to be more productive and innovative for the country.
Okay, that's very true and very important. That is human capital, human investments, investing in the people, making sure that the people have the skills that matches the modern age. Because look, if the nation is if the people in the nation are not skilled enough, automatically it will affect production. If you look at nations which are developing faster, you realize that their people are much more skilled. Look, there cannot be technological advancements if there are not people who have advanced knowledge in technology. This thing has to go hand in hand. Okay, for example, you see America, you see China, you see Russia developing advanced weaponry and those kind of stuff. It is human beings who develop them. Okay, although those, human beings who develop those things are outsourced, but most of those people come from within, because most countries will not trust their defense as in technologies in foreigners. Okay, so though they have foreigners, but you have locals being more. Okay, so look, if the people are not even advanced at the first place, they are not well trained, they are not well equipped, they do not have the skills, then education level is not good. Okay, and when we are talking about they being trained, they have to be well trained, they have to have the skills. We need people who are like very, very well skilled in all sectors. If we have this kind of people, the economy will automatically grow faster, because we have people, as in you have people who are very skilled heading our businesses, working in our businesses. They understand how businesses are run. They understand how to manufacture, how to invent. They are creating, the economy will automatically grow faster. But if you have a nation and then all your people are like are TikTok people, please, I'm not trying to say that people are on TikTok are not educated, okay? But if you have a nation where like people are most centered on like other stuffs, okay, than advancement in education or advancing their skills and knowledge. They spend more time on other things than advancing their skills and knowledge. Automatically realize that you have your companies, your production units being headed by people who are not competent enough. That's what affects production. You have people like you can't invent anything. So right now we do have a system where we have a lot of engineers, yet we give road contracts to foreigners. Okay, the reason why we have to import a lot of things from outside is because we don't have the capacity, or we don't have the people to head those kind of or to start those kind of, we don't have those skills to run those kind of businesses here. Okay, I think recently there was this helicopter crash that happened, which was a very, very sad news for the nation. And then I heard there were some forensic investigation that had to be done, okay, on the remains of the people who tragically lost their lives in the accidents. And those remains had to be sent to South Africa for that forensic investigation. And I saw this and I kept on asking myself that, what is the is it that we don't have the personnel who can do that, or the personnel do not have the equipment to do that? Okay, so basically there have to be a human capital. There has to be capital investment and investment in the people. Okay, not only in terms of capital, as in terms of skills, but we also provide them with. We also have to provide them with the technology. Okay, that they will need to be able to run some of these affairs. And that brings us to our next point, which is technological innovation or technological advancement or enhancement. So we are saying that some nations also develop faster than others due to an advancement in technology. We have companies which have mechanized systems of production. Okay, they have this. I was watching the news and I was seeing China, a car production factory. And if you look how the factory, sorry, it was a documentary, said how the factory was working. Almost every machine that operates in there is autonomous. It works on its own. You have a machine doing the welding, and automatically after it's done, the machine will pass the vehicle to another machine, which will be fixing something. You have human beings just doing the supervision or just doing minor touches to the thing. So at the end of the day, they can be able to produce a lot of vehicles in a very short period of time. If you give them a month, they can be able to produce, let's say, hundreds of vehicles because they have the technology to support it. But here in Ghana, look, if you have a local, okay, coming up with the skills to even produce the vehicles, we have to have our questions that do we have the technology to support it? Is there the technology to support that? Do we have the machinery? Do we have that technology to support that? So there might be brains. People might have the mind to manufacture things, but they do not have the technology to do them. Okay, so for example, Elon Musk is a South African. He was born in I believe he's 50. He's a half. His half is from, I don't know if United States or so, and then his half is from South Africa. But then when he was growing up, and then he knew he had goals and ambitions to enter into manufacturing or to enter into the tech field, he relocated to the United States and he was granted citizenship. Why do you think he left South Africa to the United States? It was because of the difference in technology. He knew that South Africa probably, though they were advanced in terms of technology, they did not have that level of technology to be able to support his skill or to be able to support what he wanted to do. Okay, so for a country to develop very fast, the country needs to advance in technology. Look, if South Africa had the technology to support Elon Musk's vision, like everything he had created would have been stationed in South Africa, not in the United States. Now he pays taxes in the United States. He's rather helping the United States economy grow. He's employing people in the United States. Okay, he's producing vehicles there, which is helping their overall export. He's contributing to their GDP. Why? Because America created the grounds or the technology that could help someone like Elon Musk to thrive, and not South Africa. So automatically, countries like America will grow faster. Countries like China will grow faster. Countries like Russia will grow faster. UK, Canada, those countries will automatically grow faster because they've created the technology to be able to support those kind of things. So we are also saying that there also has to be good economic policies. Okay, there has to be good economic policies. When we are talking about good economic policies, we are talking about policies that concerns taxation. If there are a lot of taxes in the system, it will discourage investments. People will not want to invest. Imagine an investor coming to invest and then you are taxing him left and right. As in, he would leave. He wouldn't want to invest. He comes, he looks at it, he will not invest. Okay, so low taxes, okay, or as in a good taxation policy would automatically drive in investment, which will cause such economies to grow faster than economies that has higher taxes. Although the government will end up gaining more revenue in the short term, but look, in the long term, the revenue the government generates from taxes will drop because the people he can tax will reduce. The companies will start leaving, and gradually your tax rate will start falling. So we are saying that countries with better economic policies, okay, like policies on taxation and trade policies, okay, would experience a quicker economic growth, okay, than that of others. And we are also as one of those economic policies also. If the country has a better interest rates, it encourages people to investment because people can get access to loans and others at lower interest rates, which will enable them to invest in the economy. Other than I'm coming. Than otherwise, sorry. And then we are also saying that another reason why some countries grow faster than others is their natural resources. And look, this is the biggest argument, okay? This is the biggest argument so far when it comes to African development. Natural resources are supposed to be a catalyst for quicker economic growth, okay? But in our case here in Africa, it is the opposite. We have the resources, but economic growth is the rate of our economy is growing. Please, anybody who says that Africa is not growing or developing is lying. Okay, but we are talking about the rate of growth or development, because look, if you want to really determine whether Africa is developing or not, go 100 years back and look at how Ghana was, and then compare it to Ghana today. You know that the nation has come a long way, or the nation has developed. Previously, this wasn't how the nation was. There weren't this much industries. Houses were clay. People did not have the money to even build modern houses. But now, if you walk around, you see the kind of houses people are building. You know that, look, there is money. Okay, you look at the kind of cars people are driving. You know that there is money. So anybody who tells you the economy is not growing, it's lying. Ghana's economy in 10 years back was not the same as today. In 20 years back was not the same as today. In 50 years back, it's not today. It's not the same as today. But when we are talking about economic growth, it's relative. We are talking about as compared to other countries, okay, who have similar natural resources as we have, or even lesser natural resources as we have. Okay, aren't we supposed to grow much faster than those countries? Because according to economics, we are saying that natural resources is supposed to be a catalyst for economic growth. That is, countries which are rich in natural resources, example, oil, gold, diamonds, and even fertile lands, those countries tend to develop faster. Look at the Middle East, like Saudi Arabia. Look, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and I'm going to give you an example here. Compare a country like Afghanistan, okay? Compare to a country like Iran, to a country like Saudi Arabia. You realize that there is a very huge, or even Jordan, Kuwait, and those kind of stuff. You realize that there is a very, very huge mismatch in the development of those countries, even though they are all heavily endowed in terms of oil, okay? Why do you think that the economic growth rates in these countries do not match? It's because when you go to a country like Saudi Arabia, their population is lesser than that of a country like Iran. Okay. If you go to a country like Saudi Arabia, they have, how do you call it? But there is political stability. There isn't much wars. There isn't a whole lot of things happening there. Today, war, tomorrow, no, you wouldn't hear that happening. But if you compare it to a country like Afghanistan, a country like Iran, always they are under sanctions. Iran currently, other countries are prohibited from buying their oil. Their oil has been banned on the world market. Why? Because of political instabilities. There are a whole lot of things going there. Today they are beefing this country, another day this with that country, another day this year, another day this year, another day that year. And as a result of that, automatically the country tends to experience a stagnant growth, even though it has higher resources. Okay, so please, this is also a question that could be asked. That okay, so let me just go straight. Let me just continue. Please, I'm coming in a minute. My battery is getting low. Let me put this on charge. Okay, so we can continue. So we are saying that it's not straightforward. We are saying that whenever we are dealing with the economics, we always say all things be equal. That means even though we are saying natural resources is a reason why some countries grow faster than the others, you are saying that it doesn't happen in all cases. It's not compulsory that if a country has a lot of natural resources, they should automatically grow. Okay, we are saying that there are other factors that could also cause them to that could cause a stagnation in growth, even though they have a lot of natural resources. And I'm trying to explain some of this because we don't know what they might ask in the examination. Okay. So I believe now we've looked at some reasons why some countries grow faster than the others. And we are saying some of the reasons is because of natural resources, okay, which Africa is an exception, okay. And then we are talking about human capital, technological innovation, economic policies. So these also contribute to some countries growing faster than the others. And please, there are a whole lot of things. So you can add population, even population is part, okay? So Nigeria like this, one of their problem is their huge population, okay? So automatically, every resource that they have has to be spread over a relatively huge number of population, okay? So population is also a reason. And then when we talk about population, we can also talk about their population distribution. Population distribution, like, are the population mostly aged or they are young? A younger population is more likely to thrive faster, or an economy whose population is much younger is most likely to thrive faster in terms of economic growth than an economy whose population is mostly aged. Aged population, they can't work. They are not contributing positively to the economy. They are only consumers, not producers. They don't produce, they only consume. Okay, but a younger population mostly contributes, or they produce, they provide more labor force and a whole lot of things that is able to force or induce economic growth. So let us go to the next question. So please, if anyone has any other contribution or question about why some countries grow faster than others, please, you can ask. Why do some countries grow faster than others? If you have any other contribution that I have not said, or you have a question, let's see so that we move on. Okay, Mr. Prince.
Okay, so I believe religion, beliefs, culture, and religion also affects big time. For example, if you consider a country like India, India has some of the best minds when it comes to maths and then information technology. But then if you study the states of their country, you can see that they prioritize their religions and then culture over national development big time. So you see, there are festival celebrations, construction of temples, the amount of funds that go into all of their religions and then all their cultural celebration and festivities takes up a big chunk of the national budget, and it has ruined the country till this day. So I believe that religion and then tradition also affects big time a country's development, even though it might have resources at its disposal. Its religion and culture might just affect how fast it develops. So that's what I think.
Okay, thank you very, 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 very much for your contribution. So please, I believe we all noted, or we all took that into, you all noted that, okay. So please, any other contribution before we move to the next question. Or a question also is welcome. Okay, so if there is none, then let's draw down the curtains on that and go to the third question. The third question, what causes unemployment? And why are millions of people unemployed even when the economy is booming? That's a very, very, very interesting question. What causes unemployment? So the first question is asking, what are the causes of unemployment? So I'll briefly run through the causes of unemployment, and then if you look at I don't know whether there is a session that talks about unemployment. Please, I'm coming in. Let me check if there is a session that talks about unemployment so that I know whether I should talk about that in depth, or I believe that along the line. Okay, session 5 talks about unemployment. So let me not spend so much time explaining the causes of unemployment. I'll just brush through because under question 5 we talk about unemployment. So yeah. So what are the causes of unemployment? So we have types of unemployment, okay? And these types of unemployment determines what the causes are, okay? So for us to know what the causes are, we have to know the types of unemployment. So unemployment could be cyclical, okay? So when we say cyclical unemployment, we are basically talking about the type of unemployment that occurs during economic recessions when demands for goods and services fall. And we noticed a similar situation during something like the COVID pandemic, okay? So we have a general recession. The economy experienced a recession. Companies had to shut down, okay? We have restaurants, they were not working. Lockdown, everyone was in his room. How do you even open your restaurant? If you even open your restaurants, who is coming to buy? I don't know if you're getting me. So look, the economy tanked, literally. So restaurants had to lay off their workers. Companies had to lay off their workers. People, although they are not doing anything wrong, they had the skills, they had everything, but they had to come home. Teachers were home, okay? They were not working. I think for public schools, they were still being paid regardless. But for private schools, I know very well how the structure works. And for private schools, usually during stuff like that, you will not be paid, you just be home. Okay, so these people were basically unemployed, and that kind of unemployment is cyclical. So cyclical occurs usually during economic recessions, okay, when there is something happening globally which causes a recession, and company has no choice than to lay off their workers. So another type of unemployment is structural unemployment, okay? So when we say structural unemployment, we are saying that basically there is a shift in the structure of the job demand. That's the easiest way to understand it. There's a basic shift in the structure of economic demands, although there are job opportunities, but the people do not have the skills, or the skills of the people do not match the available job opportunities. Okay, so currently we have the world shifting into a digital age. Look, people will be there and they will be like, there are no jobs, but people at the same time are getting jobs. Okay, what is happening? The jobs available do not have, the people available, or the people who are unemployed do not have the skills that matches the jobs that are currently in demand. That is why currently, if you make a mistake and you go and study some courses, like which does not have a job demand, or let's say, and you know what I'm talking about, right? I don't want to mention any courses that will look like discrimination or something like that. But there are some courses, look, you have to just ask yourself that after this course, what am I going to do? Because which company is going to employ me? Where exactly am I going to work? There are legitimate questions to be asked like that, okay? So in structural unemployment, basically we are saying that the jobs might be there, but then the skills, people do not have the skills to be employable in the available jobs. Okay, and it could be that a person already has a job, but he's been laid off because there is a new demands for the job and he doesn't have the skill for it. Currently, if you're a teacher in, let's say, in any modern nation or in, let's say, in any Western country, you need to have, let's say, some basic skills in operating projectors, those kind of things. If you don't have those skills, you cannot teach there, because I'm not sure you'll be holding a marker and writing on a board. So if you do not, although you have your teacher certificate, but if you do not have those basic data skills, like making presentations and those kind of stuff, you cannot do those kind of jobs. Like our lecturers that we have currently, they do not write on blackboards. They have to make presentations, assuming you don't even know how to work your way around PowerPoints. And you have to come and start an entire presentation. You have students in front of you. Look, you might even end up losing your job because you do not have the necessary skills for that particular job. So structural unemployment is a kind of unemployment that is induced because as a result of a mismatch between skills and the industry demands. And then let's look at frictional unemployment. But first, we've talked about cyclical. We said cyclical occurs during recessions, when there are basically economic recessions and workers have to be laid off. And we've talked about structural. That is when there is a change in job demands or the industry demands. And then we've talked, okay, we are going to talk about the third, which is frictional. So with frictional unemployment, we are basically talking about a scenario where people may be temporarily unemployed whilst transitioning between jobs. Okay, so let's say right now you are working in a bank, and then all of a sudden you decide to quit that job because let's say you've been promised of another job, okay, or you want to shift between another job. So it isn't as though there isn't an available job for you. There's an available job for you, but you decide to leave it. And then during a period of time where you leave that job to search for another job, you are unemployed because you are not working. So let's say if you have to stay home for 1 month before the next job will be available for you to start, that period of being unemployed is called frictional unemployment. Okay. And then we have seasonal unemployment. So as the name suggests, so these are types of unemployment that are caused as a result of changes in seasons, okay, like agriculture, like tourism. For example, the tourism industry becomes relatively stagnant during rainy season, okay, because if it's raining, you wouldn't have people visiting a lot of centers, like let's say going to visit Kakum National Park. It's raining. People are not going. People will not go to such places. Tourism like reduces. Okay, and then agriculture. Agriculture booms much more in the rainy season, especially in a country like Ghana. If you go to most of these Western countries, they do not really respect seasons when it comes to planting. Why? Because they've created mechanized system for farming. They've created how do you call this thing? Irrigation systems that automatically irrigates their crops, which have been connected to rivers and the others. So even during the dry seasons, they're able to plant. But when you come to places like Ghana, okay, agriculture is seasonal. If we are in the dry season, automatically farmers have to come home. They cannot work at those times. They do not have those systems or the infrastructure to be able to work. Okay, so those types of unemployments are seasonal. When the season changes, they are unemployed. They will be home until there's a favorable season again. So we've talked about agriculture. We've talked about tourism. Okay, and others. And we can also talk about, let's say, some factories or industries also. An industry that produces umbrella during the dry season look, we have no relation with umbrellas. What are you going to use umbrellas for? So if you are producing umbrellas during the dry season, probably for the sun, okay, someone might say umbrellas, people do use umbrellas to cover them from the sun, but umbrellas are most often used in the rainy season, like something like raincoats. If you are producing raincoats in the dry season, I don't know who would be buying them and what that person would be using it for, because even as the name goes, it's meant for rain. So the demand for those kind of goods increases much more in the rainy seasons. So factories producing those kind of goods will have to lay off some of their workers, if not halt their production during such seasons. And then, yeah, so these are the basic types of unemployment that we have. So we've talked about cyclical. That is the kind of employment that occurs during recessions, okay, economic recessions, like COVID. What happened during COVID? So we've talked about structural. That is when people do not have the skills to meet the job demands. We are talking about frictional, where that is the time spent in moving from one job to the other. And we are talking about seasonal. Okay, that is unemployment that occurs as a result of changes in seasons. So that is that for what unemployment is. So now let us look at reasons why millions of people are unemployed, even when economies are booming. Okay, so why are millions of people unemployed, even when an economy is booming? So let's make this an open question. Let's make this an open question, and then we go to the last question, and then we are done for today. So please, the question again, we are saying that why are millions of people unemployed even when the economy is booming? So we can make our contributions. Why are millions of people unemployed even when the economy is booming? Please, if you have any submission to me, you can do so, please. Why do we think people are unemployed even when economies are booming? Yes. And please, anyone who would want to make a contribution. Yeah, hello, Mr. Prince. Please, we are listening to you.
Yeah, lack of skill, lack of required skills for particular jobs.
Okay, so Mr. Prince is saying that even though an economy might be booming, people might be unemployed because they do not have the skills to match up with the job demands, which is 100% true. Okay, so one of the main reasons why people might experience unemployment, even during economic booms, is because they might not have the skills to match the job demands. That is very true. So please, any other person with any other submission? Okay, so Mr. Prince.
Yeah, also technological advancements, rising
Okay.
tools like use of artificial intelligence and all makes the need for humans at certain workplaces quite little. So reduces employment big time.
Okay, which is also very, very, very true. Okay, so any other contribution to this? Any other contribution to this? All right, if there is none, then let's go straight to it. So we can talk about the mismatch in skills, just as Mr. Prince talked about. So whilst an economy is booming, jobs are created, okay? But the question is, do the people have the skills to match the current job demands? So if the people do not have the skills to match the current job demands, the economy might be booming, all right, jobs might be created, but there will still be unemployment, okay? Another scenario is the case of relatively huge populations. So when there are relatively huge populations, there might be economic boom, though new jobs would be created, all right, but then the people will still not be able to get access to the jobs. Why? Because the population is too huge, or the labor force. Okay, and when we are talking about the population, we are talking about the distribution of the population. That is the population being drifted much more towards the younger population. The labor force are more, and so the job hunt is relatively higher. So even though the economy is experiencing an expansion and people are kind of more jobs are being created, but not all of them are able to secure employment. And then yeah, so these are some basic reasons why there might be unemployment even when an economy is experiencing growth. So let's go to the last question and then we are done for the day. What drives price changes, which is inflation, I mean, and why does the cost of living keeps rising? So you first have to look at inflation, and after that, you come and look at why the cost of living keeps rising. It is important to know the relationship between the cost of living and inflation. This is very, very important. Cost of living, inflation, standard of living. You have to know these three and how they relate to one another. Okay, so let's first look at inflation. So we are saying that inflation is basically the persistence increase, okay, in the prices of commodities, or in the prices of goods and services in a nation. We are saying that we are dealing with macroeconomics. We are looking at a nation and not individuals. So when we are looking at inflation under macroeconomics, we don't look at it as though we are looking at inflation under microeconomics. Please, this is something that you have to always be conscious of when answering questions under macroeconomics. Don't answer it as though you are answering a microeconomics question. Don't explain it in relation to individuals. So please, with regards to economics, the current economics are economics too. Okay, you don't explain anything in relation to individuals, firms, and industries. Try to relate it to the broader economy. Okay, so inflation is the persistent rise in goods and services. Okay, in a nation. That is what we refer to as inflation. Please a second. Sorry. So that is what we refer to as inflation. So basically, if we experience a situation where when you go to the markets, previously, let's say tomatoes was sold at 5 cedis, but all of a sudden the prices has gone up to 7 cedis. Transport fares have gone up, fuel cost has gone up, everything is going up. Okay, so we say that there is inflation. And not only goods, but services also. Now, if you call a carpenter to come and fix your door, he's charging more than he used to charge. Everything is going up. You know, inflation is occurring. Okay. And we are saying that there are two main driving forces to inflation. The one is the demand for individual goods and services, and the two is the cost of production. Okay. So inflation can be demand pulled or demand induced or cost pulled or cost induced. Okay. So the demand for commodities can cause inflation, same as the cost of production of the commodities. I've talked about this previously during this same submission. I was saying that when people have more money to spend and they are demanding more, with supply being constant, automatically there would be scarcity and the prices of commodities would skyrocket. In the practical sense, you are saying that if suppliers realize that the demand is increasing, any amount that they produce, people are buying and so on. If you are selling something, okay, and that thing that you are selling, like, and so on, like people are buying, the demand is there. You just bring your goods to the markets within some few hours, it's out. You have to go for new ones. You know that now I have the market. I can price my goods anyhow I want to price them, and people will still patronize them because they have no immediate substitutes. Okay, and this happens mostly in the cases where okay, let me not talk about this, but basically, if demand goes up, the spending power is more. Suppliers tend to increase prices because they know that, look, no matter how they increase their prices, you have no choice than to purchase the commodity. So they know that even if they are not good to their customers, even if they increase the prices, you will still come in. People will still buy, or they will still get people to buy them. So that is a demand pulled inflation. Alternatively, if the demand for goods and services are very, very low, suppliers will be compelled to reduce their prices for people to buy more. Okay, if you are selling, you go around and people are not buying. It tells you something that, look, the prices of the things you are selling is higher. People cannot afford them. You have to reduce the prices. Okay, so when there is a decrease in demand and automatically supply is constant, okay, it would create surplus, which would force how do you call it, reduction in the prices, because the producers or the suppliers will now have surplus. Okay, they have a lot of goods that they cannot sell. They have to reduce the prices in order to sell those goods. And please, in a normal market setting, this happens. The reason why I don't want to use the normal market setting is that this involves individuals. But here we are talking about the broader economy. But it's easier to understand if you relate it with the normal way. But please make sure when you are explaining, you always explain with regards to the broader economy. Okay. So if inflation is not demand pulled, then it's going to be cost pulled. Okay. That is the cost of production. You can say the raw materials, let's say gassing, they need clinker, they need limestone, they need like the things that they use to produce cement. If those raw materials, if their prices increase, automatically they'll have to also increase their prices. Although the demand is constant, but prices of commodities will increase because cost of production has increased. If fuel cost goes up, if electricity cost goes up, they need those things to produce. Okay, we are talking about a cold store which supplies frozen chicken or which supplies, let's say, fish. They need electricity to operate. If electricity cost goes up, automatically the cost of their services would also go higher. So that is cost pull inflation. It is caused by an increase or decrease in the cost of the factors of production, which is mainly raw materials, labor, and others. Okay. And now the question arises that why does the cost of living keeps increasing? So why does the cost of living increasing? So now, based on understanding on inflation, can we answer the question, why does the cost of living keeps increasing? So please let us take opinions and then, okay, so Kayum. Why does the cost of living keeps increasing? Kayum. Okay, sorry. You can talk now, please.
Okay. Please, I have a question. Like the rise of price of like 2 or 3 goods, can you classify it as inflation?
Please come again.
Like the rise of 2 or 3 product, can you classify it as inflation?
Yeah, it's so far as there is a rise, it's inflation. Okay, but with macroeconomics, we are talking about like you see, you hear the news and it will be like inflation rates are 5%. They are not just talking about a particular goods, but they are talking about like the general inflation. Okay, so we are not talking about if you are talking about, let's say, agricultural goods, we are talking about, let's say, the inflation of tomatoes, all those things. We find the average of all those, and then we reference them. So yes, they are inflation, but then macroeconomics seeks to look at the broader units. Okay, so instead of we just looking at the increase in price for one tomato seller, we are now looking at the increase in prices of, let's say, agricultural goods in total or in general. Okay, and then we look at, let's say, other units in general. Like, so we want to generalize inflation more than look at specifics for one individual to another or one firm or industry to another.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome, sir. Okay, so please, any contribution to the question? If there is none, let's quickly answer this, and then we move on. Okay, so we are saying that the basic reason why prices of goods will keep increasing. Look, if any, okay, let me not say this, but generally, a reduction in prices of goods in the long term is never promised. Okay, I'm using a word is never promised. Why? Because you can reduce it in the short term, but it will still increase in the long term. Because basically, with respect to time, okay, or with time, things like income has to increase. They will increase. The spending power of people would increase. The purchasing power of people will increase. And when they increase, they will buy more. And when they buy more, what will happen? Demand increases. Demand increases, automatically prices of goods increases, inflation occurs. At a point in time, prices of raw materials would increase, inflation occurs. Okay, so prices of goods will keep on increasing no matter what you do. So with regards to that, let us look at what cost of living is. Okay, and it's very, very important to answering this question. So let's look at cost of living. So cost of living is basically the amount of money, okay, that is required to maintain or to us in the amount of money that you need to survive. Like basically, that is cost of living. Okay, and it varies from places to places. For instance, if you go to Nigeria, the cost of living in Nigeria will be greater than Ghana. Okay, is it greater than Ghana? I don't know. I'm not sure, but it's not the same. It varies from nations to nations. Probably if you go to Nigeria, I think it might even be lesser. I don't know. I'm not sure either. So when you go there, probably what 100 cities can do there will be different from this place. So let's say rent cost. Is it expensive there or here? Okay, so that measures the overall cost of living. We are talking about the amount of money that you need to survive. Okay, let's say in a day, in a week, in a month, that becomes your cost of living. Okay, but when we are talking about macroeconomics, we are talking about an economy in general. So in a country, when we are talking about the cost of living, we are talking about generally how much do people need in order to survive? How much money do they need to afford their daily meals, rent, those things coming together, those contribute to cost of living. So when we are talking about cost of living, we'll factor into effect things like rent cost, things like the prices of commodities, things like the cost of services. Okay, all this comes together when determining the cost of living. So actually, a reduced cost of living dictates an increased standard of living. Okay, so the standard of living in a country will be better if the cost of living in a country is lower. So standard of living basically means that, like, currently, how comfortable are people? Like, as in people, how good is the living condition of people in a country? That's the standard of living. So if the cost of living is lower, it means that their standard of living is automatically higher. Okay, and if their cost of living is also higher, then their standard of living will be lower. And if cost of living is lower, standard of living will be higher. Okay, so let us understand the relation between cost of living and standard of living. Okay, and the cost of living will keep on increasing due to inflation. The main reason, the answer is just one. It is due to inflation. Why does the cost of living keeps rising? It is due to inflation because prices of goods and services keeps on increasing. And so far as prices of goods and services keeps increasing, then the cost of living will keep increasing. Rent cost will keep increasing. Fuel costs will keep increasing. The vehicle cost will keep increasing. The cost of goods and services will generally keep increasing. Okay, so that is the last question we'll be looking at. So I believe we've already exhausted a lot of time or most of our time, and we'll continue the next time we have economics. So if anyone has any question, you can ask. Otherwise, we can close. Yes, Kayu.
Okay, so you made mention that if the cost of living is high, there's low standard of living or something like that. If I can hear you clearly. So in Ghana,
I said yes, please. I'm listening.
In Ghana, like there's some places if the standard of living is high, the cost of living will also be high, like Transaco and things because they get money. Like there's the standard of living there is very high. So mostly, if you go there, if you want to buy even an apple at or a shirt at Transaco or East Legon, is very different from Tudu or something like that. So I just want to know how it's happened like that.
Okay, I believe what you are saying is very, very, very true. That is, in economics, there are always exceptions. That's why we always see all things be equal. That means there are times that things will not be equal. The rule might not cut across, okay? But it is important to note that in macroeconomics, we don't really look at specific units, but we try to generalize everything. So although there might be specific units within the economy that defines the general rule. We are trying to look at everything in general, or we try to look at everything in general. Okay, so what you said is very, 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 very correct. There are exceptions to it. And I think economics does appreciate that most of its rules do come with its own exceptions. So please, any other question? Okay, so due to the time, let's not spend any more time. We can bring the entire session to an end. So Mr. Prince. Hello, Mr. Prince. Oh, okay, then we'll meet tomorrow. I don't really know what we have tomorrow, but I believe yeah, so let's meet tomorrow. Okay. All right, so the meeting has closed.